Which operating system to host your ASP.NET Core application on? Windows or Linux? One of the distinct benefits of ASP.NET Core over ASP.NET is the fact that it has Linux support. So that means when it comes to hosting, we don't have to rely on Windows hosting. We can also go for Linux hosting as well. In this video, we'll have a look at Windows versus Linux, and we'll be comparing against installing, hosting, and performance. Now, for more ASP.NET Core tutorials, visit roundthecode.com, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/roundthecode, and like our Facebook page at facebook.com/roundthecode. So we're now going to have a look at hosting prices for Windows and Linux. Now in front of me, I've got A2 Hosting's website. And if you want a fast performing web host at fantastic prices, go to roundthecode.com/hosting. Now, if we have a look at the unmanaged VPS hosting, so we're going to actually install the server ourselves, we can see that for $7.99 a month, we can get a gig of RAM, 150 gig SSD, 2 terabyte transfer, and 1 core. Now, A2 hosting is good for Linux, but it doesn't offer Windows hosting. So in order to do that, we're going to have to use OVH and come up with a comparison. So this is OVH Cloud, and we're going to have a look at the value plan. So the value plan is similar to the one that we compared on A2 hosting. So it's got 1 vCore, 2 gigabytes of RAM. It's only got a 40 gig SSD, which is probably why the price is that little bit cheaper. But the thing with the value plan and OVH Cloud is that it offers Windows hosting as well. So we're going to go ahead and order that. So on here we can choose our image. So we've got a number of Linux systems on here like CentOS and Ubuntu. We've also got Windows Server as well, and as you can see it adds an extra $4.50 to the total. So that means we're going to have to pay $4.50 extra a month just for Windows hosting. Now that might not seem a lot, but when you add it up over the year, it's quite a lot. So we can see in this instance that Linux hosting is a lot cheaper than Windows hosting. So we are now going to have a look at installing an ASP.NET Core application on an operating system. Now with Linux, it's better to write a lot of SSH commands. You can install a UI onto a Linux machine, but we found with A2 hosting and OVH that you had to run an SSH command to install it. Plus we found with the lower spec machines that the UI was really slow and it actually resetted the machine sometimes. So in order to install an ASP.NET Core application onto Linux, I'm going to refer you to my video how to install an ASP.NET Core application in .NET 5 using Ubuntu 20.04. Let's take a look. What we've done is we've created an ASP.NET Core web API application. It's very simple, so if I run it for you. So as you can see, we've got a couple of endpoints. It's not hooked up to a database or anything, but we're just going to test to see if it works. So we're going to try out this one. So as you can see, it's returning some programming languages there. And if we load this one as well, try it out. And as you can see, it's got some operating systems there. So we know our ASP.NET Core web API is actually working. So we can go ahead and stop that. We need to make a slight change to this because basically what's going to happen is basically we're going to host our ASP.NET Core application on a Kestrel server in our actual VPS, and then we're going to proxy it in through Apache. So what we need to do is we need to go ahead and just make this forward headers command in the configuration, in the configure services, no, in the configuration. So that goes in like that. Let's go ahead now and publish it. So what we're going to do is we're going to publish it to a folder. Click next. So happy with that. Let's go ahead and publish it to that folder. Okay, so if we open that up, we should be able to see all our actual files on there. Okay, so that's basically our application published. Now we need to go ahead and configure our server. So the next thing we need to do is basically connect to our server using SSH. So what I've done with this is I've basically opened up a PowerShell window in administration mode, and I'm basically going to run the SSH command. So let's go ahead and do that. So it's SSH, it's the username, which is root at the server name .net.roundthecode.com. And normally SSH is configured on port 22, but with A2 hosting, it's configured with 7822. So we need to pass in a P parameter and put in the port number. Now I need to go ahead and enter my password. So you can see now I'm connected to my server using SSH. First thing I need to do is I need to go ahead and actually create a new user for it. So in order to do that, I'm going to run the sudo.adduser command and add a new user of roundthecode. Give it a password, confirm the password, and then we can just press enter for all that, and that's all now set up for us. Next thing we need to do is we basically need to install something called Nano, and Nano is basically a text editor in SSH that we can use, so we can actually do some configuration. So in order to do that, we run sudo apt install nano, and that will go ahead and install our Nano package. Okay, so that's now installed for us. Now, normally you'd have to install Apache 2 at this stage, but with A2 hosting, it's already been installed. But if you need to do it, you can run apt install Apache 2, and that will actually go ahead and install it. So it says that we've already got the newest version on there, so we don't need to do that. What we do need to do though is enable some mods on there. So the first one we need to enable is rewrite. So we've done that. We also need to enable proxy, proxy underscore HTTP, headers, and SSL. So that's that done for us. Next thing we need to do is we basically need to create a new configuration file. So we're going to run it using Nano. So that's the text editor we just installed, and it's located in etc Apache 2 sitesenabled.api.conf. So this has basically created a file for us. We've already created this for us, and basically what this is doing is it's set up a couple of new hosts. It's set up our forwarded headers up here, and then we've got a new virtual host here, which is basically going to proxy in from our Kestrel server, which is going to run on port 5000, which we'll set up in a little bit. Got a server name, alias, and we've set up some custom error logs and custom logs. So in order to get out of this, we press Control X. Normally that will ask us if we want to save it, if we made changes, or it's a new file, and we would just type the Y button. Now that we've gone ahead and done that, we need to go ahead and actually restart our Apache server. Like so. Now that that's happened, we basically need to get the files uploaded onto our actual server. So we're going to use FileZilla for this, and what I've done is I've basically gone ahead and created a new SFTP profile here. The host is .net.roundthecode.com, and it's basically using SSH, so it's the same port number there, 7822. This is the username we just connected, we just set up, round the code. We've put the password in there as well, so we're going to go ahead and actually connect that to us. So this is now located at home, round the code. This is our profile for round the code. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new directory in here, call it API, and we're basically going to upload our published folders onto our server, published files even. Okay, so that's pretty much done. Is it all up there? Yes, it's all up there now. So what we can do is we can basically go back to our SSH, and what we need to do now is we basically need to copy these files over from the home round the code folder to far www. Now, in order to do that, we run sudo cp -r, and it's called home round the code API. So this is basically going to copy it from home round the code API to far www. Okay, so that's now copied our files into far www/API. What we need to do is just set some permissions on here. So we basically want to set the group owner, and we're going to set it for www-data. And that's going to be in var www-API. Okay, so that's now done. What we need to do next is we basically need to actually install the application. Now to do that, what I need to do is basically need to install the advanced package tool from Microsoft. So in order to do that, what I can do is I can basically go ahead and run this command here. So it'll go ahead and get all the packages, and we also need to go ahead and install this as well. So that's that done. What we need to do now is do an apt-get update, like so, and then we need to do a couple of installations. So we need to install apt transport HTTPS, already installed for us, but you will have to do that. And we also need to install the ASP.NET Core Runtime 5.0. So that's now been installed for us. So the next thing we need to do is we basically need to go ahead and create a service for us. So we run sudo nano etc the system api.service, and we're basically going to run our application as a service. So I've already created this for us, but basically we're giving it a working directory. So this is where we've uploaded our actual files to. It's where the directory is for our ASP.NET Core application. It's running .NET, and that's the main application that it's going to run. So it's run the code.myapi.dll. A couple of other things. We've got the user www data. It's running in production mode, and that's all pretty good. So in order to do that, we now need to enable it. So we run sudo systemctl enable api.service, and then we need to go ahead and start it. And we can just check that it's running by running sudo ctl systemctl status api.service. And as you can see, our actual configuration is running on localhost 5000. Now, before this is going to work, I've just noticed I've made a slight error with the actual Apache configuration. So I need to go ahead and make a change to that. So in order to do that, what I need to do is I need to run sudo nano etc apache 2 sites enabled api.configuration. So up here with the virtual hosts, I need to basically add .com in there. So I've gone ahead and saved that, Control and X to exit, and that's now been saved for us. Need to go ahead and actually restart the Apache server. So in order to do that, I run systemctl restart apache 2. Okay, so now our application should be running, so let's give it a go and see if it's going to work. So we've got our API endpoints there. You can see now it's passing in our languages. And let's just try out our other API endpoint. As you can see, that's working for us as well. One thing that video didn't show you is how to set up SignalR on ASP.NET Core. With Apache, we need to proxy the WebSocket traffic to the WS protocol on the ASP.NET Core application. To do that, we set up a rewrite rule in Apache. If the connection header is set to upgrade and the upgrade header is set to WebSocket, then we proxy the traffic through the WS protocol in our ASP.NET Core application. You can see that in the example shown on screen. So we're now going to go ahead and install an ASP.NET Core application in IIS on Windows 10. I've got Windows 10 open in front of me, and what we need to do is we need to go to the control panel so we can do a search for the control panel, and we go to Programs and Features. So in here we need to select Turn Windows Features On or Off. Now from there we need to go down to Internet Information Services. We go in there and we need to make sure that World Wide Web Services is ticked. So what I tend to do is I tend to tick all of them. You can select which features of IIS you want, but I tend to tick all of them. Once you've done that, it will go ahead and install IIS for you. We've already done that, so we don't need to do that, but normally it would take a few moments just to install IIS. Now, in order to do the other bits, like to install the ASP.NET Core runtime and things like that, I'm going to refer you now to my video of 4 reasons why your ASP.NET Core application isn't working in IIS. Let's take a look. So in front of us, we've already got an ASP.NET Core application open in Visual Studio. What we're going to do now is we're basically going to go ahead and publish it to a folder. So So we go into publish, and we've got a target location there, and we're going to publish it to that folder. Now, whilst it's doing that, we've basically already set up an IIS website for this application. If we go into basic settings, you can see we've set up the physical path, which represents the folder that we're publishing to. In addition to that as well, we've got binding set up for React Signal R. If we go into our host file, you can see that we've already set up an IP address pointing to that particular host. So it's just going ahead and finishing up the publishing. When it does, we're going to test it in IIS to see what exactly happens. Does it actually work or not? So it's gone ahead and do that. So we can go ahead, we can turn on the website in IIS. And if we refresh that, we're getting a 500.19 error there. It cannot read the file because of permissions. It's got some sort of permissions issue, as you can see down there. So quite easy to resolve that. So this is the folder where we're basically hosting our application in IIS. If we right click on it, and we can go to properties. So we've got a couple of groups and users in there that have got permissions, but we need to add another one. So on Windows 10, typically, if we can find it, it's IIS iUsers. So what you can typically do is just give it full permission, and that should hopefully resolve the issue. Now, if you find that that doesn't resolve the issue, or that group isn't there, then you can also add the users on there, and that should also make it work. But obviously, bear in mind that there might be some sort of security issues if you're giving access to all users, but you can basically click on the users, and that should at least get the thing going. But anyway, so let's go ahead and do that. So let's apply those changes and see if it's actually resolved the issue. So if we go back, give it a refresh. Okay, so we're still getting the 500.19 error, but crucially, there's no error there. Now, what could be the reason for that? Well, basically, we need to download the ASP.NET Core runtime for it to work. Not only does it have it for x64 and x86, but also it installs runtime support for IIS. So you can get that from Microsoft's website here, and it's basically this down here. So runtime 3.7, and it clearly says here, on Windows, we recommend installing the hosting bundle, which includes the .NET Core runtime and IIS support. And so that's basically that here. Now we've already downloaded this, so we're just going to go ahead and install it. Crucially though, we've basically written the application 3.1.7, but we're going to install an ASP.NET Core runtime that's a slightly lower version. We're going to go for version 1. So we're going to go ahead and install that. So that's going ahead and doing that now. So once this is installed, we'll try it again in IIS to see if it's actually resolved the issue or not, or whether we might have some issues with the version. There we go, it's successfully completed that. So let's go ahead and see what happens. So let's go ahead and refresh our application. Okay, so we've got a different issue now. We've got a 500.21. Handler ASP.NET Core has a bad module, ASP.NET Core module v2 in its module list. Okay, so obviously that's an issue there where we've got a different version runtime to where we've actually, the actual version number that we've written our ASP.NET Core application in Visual Studio. So let's go ahead and actually install the right one now. So we're going to go ahead and install 3.1.7. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So it's just going ahead and doing that. So hopefully after that, it will resolve the issue, all being well. So it's gone ahead and done that. Okay, so we've got a different error now. We've now got a 500.30 error. What does that mean exactly? Well, there's no actual issue with IIS, there's an issue with your application. So if we go back into our application and try and run it locally to see if we can diagnose what the issue is. Now you might find that there is no issue running it locally, and there's actually an issue on your production server. As you can see there, I've deliberately put in an error there just to sort of demonstrate this. But going back to what I was saying, you might find that on your production server, it might have an issue like it can't see the database. So how do we go about resolving that? Well, what we can do is if we go into our folder where we've published, we can go down to the web config, So we open up the web config and you can see here we've got this ASP.NET Core tag in here, and inside here we've got an attribute of std out log enabled, and that's currently set to false. We've also got this std out log file, and that's basically a folder where it can store log files. Obviously this is turned off by default, but we can turn it on and just save that, and then we can try and rerun it again. So it's still going to throw an error, but what we can do is you can see it's created this logs folder up here. So if we go in here, we can have a look and see what error we're getting. So it's saying input string was not in the correct format, startup line CS line 39. So if we go back into our Visual Studio application, you can see it's this issue here. So we can go ahead and remove that. Go ahead and republish it. Before we republish it, we just need to turn the site off, so it's able to actually overwrite the files. So we go ahead and publish that. So once this is, now we're publishing an application where it's basically shouldn't have any particular issues with it. Hopefully it will go ahead and work. So let's turn it back on in IIS. Not quite, it's not quite finished yet. Okay, so it's finished publishing now. So we can go ahead and turn it back on in IIS. And let's just give it another go just to see if it's going to work. There you go, you see our application is now working in IIS. You can just make sure that the functionality is working, because this is actually a React application. Well, it's got an API built in. So this is all working for an API and SignalR as well. It was one of the demonstrations I showed earlier on, and as you can see, it's all working. So we're now going to test out the performance of an ASP.NET Core application on Windows and Linux. Now we're going to start off with Linux, and in front of me I've got an ASP.NET Core application loaded inside a Linux operating system. Now this is Flash, and it's a Twitter dashboard that displays real-time tweets. It's written in Blazor WebAssembly, and it integrates with an ASP.NET Core Web API and a Twitter API through SignalR. The ASP.NET Core Web API also integrates with a SQL Server database as well, so it integrates with quite a lot of technologies. So the way this works is that we need to send a tweet and it will appear on our dashboard. So I'm going to go into my Run the Code Twitter account and I'm going to send out a tweet. I'm going to put hello there. Just testing out Flash on Linux. So just about to send that tweet now. That's been sent, so let's just see how long it's going to take before it displays on the actual dashboard for us. So it normally only takes a few minutes, and there you go. So that only took about 10 seconds. So you can see that's performing well on Linux. Let's have a look at it in Windows. So we're going to do the same thing now on Windows. So I've got Flash installed on a Windows system. So I'm going to go ahead and send a tweet out. So I'm going to put testing out Flash on Windows and hit tweet. Okay, the tweet is sent. So let's see how long it's going to be. It was about 10 seconds on Linux. So let's see if it's going to be roughly around the same sort of time that it appears on here. And there you go, you can see it's sort of the same sort of time. And just to say with this is that both of these systems were installed using Hyper-V. They had the same spec, same software on there. So we were just trying to test the performance just to see how each one compares. Windows or Linux? Well, that's down to personal preference. If you're comfortable writing SSH commands and want cheap web hosting, then it has to be Linux. However, if you're familiar with Windows and comfortable with its UI, then you need to go with Windows hosting. Regardless of what operating system you choose, you should find that the performance is very identical. Now, thanks very much for watching, and hit a like on the video.